Okay, so you should have hosting rights now.
I see that.
Perfect. Okay, so everybody, this is Brian Coombs. If you are not familiar with him, he is the short sale specialist out of KW Mullinex in Norman. So he has agreed to do this training for us today, and we're very grateful for that. Brian, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
I am obviously I've been with Keller Williams now for 6 years, almost 7 years, but I've been in real estate since 2006. So that's as of March 1st, that was 17 years.
Wow.
That math add up right? Anyway, whatever.
No one's counting. It's okay.
But I have done, I worked at Mary Berry's office in Oklahoma City before I joined Keller Williams. And for those of you that don't know, Mary Berry had she had the contract for HUD homes and not short sales, HUD homes and Fannie Mae and everything like that. So I have sold a ton of foreclosures, and that led into also working with a ton of short sales because one usually leads into the other. I've done several short sales. This class today is going to be mostly about short sales. Just FYI, I do have a separate class about foreclosures, but that's a very generalized class. I don't concentrate on HUDs or Fannie Mae's or VA foreclosures or anything like that. I mention all that, but that's just how that class is. Now, today we're going to talk mostly about short sales, and that will take probably an hour, hour and a half, depending on how many questions everyone has.
Perfect.
So I'm going to go ahead. I have a brief little PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so everyone can see that. And don't have to worry about looking at me all day. See if we can get this sucker going. No, I'll just do that. Okay. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Like I said a minute ago, we're going to talk about short sales and short sales in this weird wonky market that we all got going on. It's different than it was 6 months ago. It's different than it was 2 years ago. So it's one of those things that it changes as the market changes. So first thing we're going to talk about is, what is a short sale? So it's pretty easy. A short sale is where the seller's mortgage company is agreeing to take less than what they are actually owed as the payoff. So for example, if the sellers or the owners of this property need to sell and their balance is $150,000, but because of deterioration or they overbought or something like that, the house is only worth 120, then, in the end, it's a short sale because the bank is agreeing to take less than 150 as the payoff. Some things you need to know about this in general is the owners must be behind on their payment. It sucks. They're going to be behind on the payment. It's going to hit their credit. It's going to be a drain on them. They're going to get phone calls, everything like that. But they have to be behind on their mortgage payment in order to qualify to even begin a short sale. They also have to have a valid reason or a hardship. One of the first things that banks make the sellers do in these cases is create a hardship letter. And that hardship letter is just one of those where it just decides, where they explain what happened. Why did you get behind? Why can you not afford the house payment anymore? What happened? And usually a valid reason for a hardship is they got divorced, they got laid off their job, they got fired from their job, someone got sick and they had to take care of them. Situations like that is the typical thing for a short sale, and those are valid reasons for hardships. Now, there could be some other weird reason, and what I tell people in those situations is, let's send it over to the mortgage company and see what they say. Part of the process also on the seller side is they have to prove that they can no longer afford the mortgage payments. And this includes providing bank statements, pay stubs if they're still working, tax records. Usually they have to provide the last 2 years of tax records. If they're retired, they have to provide, Social Security benefits, the awards letter, everything like that. And they have to also be prepared to update those records. So if just because they provided the pay stubs and the bank statements once doesn't mean that that's the only time they're going to have to do it. They're probably going to have to do it 2 or 3 times before everything's closed and finalized. And the property must be worth less than the payoff. I've actually seen this happen before where they had the property listed at a ridiculously low price just to try to get offers. And then come to find out after the bank did their due diligence and had an appraisal ordered and everything like that, the house is worth more than what they thought. And it was worth enough to actually pay off the loan. So they obviously did not approve the short sale. And it just kind of killed the deal because the buyer wasn't willing to pay what they said it was worth at that point. So again, the property's got to be worth more, which in most cases isn't an issue, because usually if they're not making their mortgage payment, they're also not maintaining the property. So it's probably deteriorated, at least in some way. And it is worth less than, the house across the street or the house down the road or in the same neighborhood. Not usually an issue. Is the short sale, or is looking at short sales even the right idea for your buyers? Now, right now we're talking about if you have a buyer and they are looking at making an offer or looking at considering short sales as an option for them to buy. First off, short sales are as is, where is. So we just got through talking about usually if they're not making their mortgage payment, they're also not maintaining the property. Now the value is usually takes that into consideration. Usually they take into account the fact that, the windows are busted or the heater stopped working 2 years ago or something along those lines. So that should be taken into account when they come up with the value of the property. But it's as is. So the buyers need to be aware of that. Most important is this top one here that says they are the only thing short about a short sale is the payoff. 3 years ago, I got a short sale through with Wells Fargo in 3 months from the time an offer was made, jumped through all the hoops and got it closed. We got it closed in 3 months. That is moving super quick for short sales. Now in today's world with the COVID and everyone getting basically getting a break on their mortgage payment and rent and everything like that, it's extending these processes out even further. I had one under contract for 14 months before we finally got it closed. And that was before COVID kicked in and slowed everything else down. So again, you got to be in it for the long haul. On a buyer side, if they are looking for a house for them to move into and they have they've got to move into somewhere, then short sales is not something they really need to be looking at. It's too long of a process for most buyers, unless they're an investor and they're willing to take a chance and be patient. Third is the bank will likely try to negotiate the sales price, and usually that's months after the contract is accepted and you're under contract. So just so you guys know, the process is your buyers make an offer on this property as a short sale. They provide all the short sale disclosures and disclaimers and everything. Like here in Oklahoma City, we have a form that we attach to it that says it's a short sale addendum that we attach to our purchase contracts. And it just basically says, you understand this is short sale, it's subject to lender approval, and the property could stay on the market and accept backups and everything like that. It's just so everyone knows that is something that's, that is part of the contract. So they don't even start the short sale process until the offer is accepted by the seller and then sent over to the bank for them to review. So that's the next step. They accept an offer, and then everything is sent to their mortgage company for them to start the short sale process and start reviewing it. Now, if they have a realtor that knows what they're doing and has dealt with short sales before, the next few steps are something that's done very quickly. But they, like I said before, they have to provide bank statements. They have to provide tax returns, pay stubs if they're working. They got to have a hardship letter. And and the very first step is the bank has to get permission to talk to the realtor that's involved. And I've sent those. It's called a third-party authorization form. I sent those in and waited for literally 10 days for it to go through their process and their system, and it finally show up where when I call, I can talk to the representative and they can see that I actually have permission to talk to them. So after all that, they do all that, and an appraisal is ordered, or a couple of BPOs are ordered to get an idea of the value of the property. Then the bank can say, oh, well, we won't accept this offer that you guys made, but we will accept this much, which usually is higher. My last short sale, I had it under contract for $50,000. They came back and said, oh, no, this house is worth $75,000. And I went in and I sent them pictures for the second time of all the damage that I could see and everything we knew was wrong. And the buyers shared their inspection with me, and I sent that on to the bank, and we contested their $75,000 value. But again, we were under contract for 50. They came back at 75, and that was 3.5 months into the process. So luckily, the buyers and their realtor had an idea that this was at least a possibility of happening, because I warned them, hey, this could happen. And then I told them what we would do if it did happen. So we contested the value. We were able to finally come to terms, and then we move forward with closing. Once the short sale is approved, they give you 30 or 45 days to close on that based on whatever purchase price is finally agreed on. Then it became the normal process. Any other inspections that needed to be done, any appraisals that needed to be done and stuff like that, then they were able to move forward. But most likely, there's probably a good chance that you're going to get under contract for one amount and the bank is going to come back and at least try to get a higher amount. And this last step, this is unfortunately part of it. Eventually the banks do give up. They do are forced to move forward with foreclosure. Short sale is done up until foreclosure. It becomes a better option. Basically, mortgage companies have to give sellers a chance to try to do a short sale before they can move forward with foreclosure. But again, eventually they will just move forward with foreclosure. And I've had it happen where they move forward with foreclosure literally 3 days before we were set to close. And there was nothing I can do about it. I called and once I got notification, I called and I complained and I sent emails and everything like that. And they just were done. They didn't care. They moved forward with foreclosure. So unfortunately, it's part of it. It could be foreclosed. So they can't be married to this house and think that this is the house. They got to be patient. What you should expect when you're making an offer on a foreclosure or on a short sale, I'm sorry. Expect, just like with every other property that we're seeing, expect that there's multiple offers. They got to make the highest offer that they're willing to make. Will have to, most likely the listing realtor is forced to at least hold other offers as backups. I promise you, after listing several of these properties, I promise you buyers will eventually pull out and drop out and decide that they're just done waiting. They're not waiting on this any longer. So they'll just rescind their offer and move on to the next one. Well, then I have to go to, as the listing agent, I have to go to the next people in line and ask their realtor, or if I'm working with them directly, contact them and ask them, are you still interested in this property? Because the other buyers backed out. And then the really obnoxious thing is we got to start over. Got to start over with a new buyer and a new contract. So that's why I emphasize to everyone that's going to make an offer, you got to be patient. I can't say it enough. They have to be patient. They have to be willing to wait 6 months, 8 months, maybe even longer for everything to go through their process. Because again, what you've got to see on your side, on the buyer side or on the listing side, is you got to understand that the sellers have to jump through hoops. Sometimes the buyers have to jump through hoops, especially if they're buying with an LLC. They have to provide the bank with those LLC docs and everything like that to prove that they can make the offer. And then they got to go and have an appraisal done. Sometimes they got to have an appraisal done and 2 or 3 BPOs done to get an average price. And then they've got to go to their mortgage insurance company and they've got to get approval of that purchase price from their mortgage insurance company to see if they can get paid the difference. Just like with foreclosures, in case you guys don't know, the mortgage insurance is going to pay the original mortgage company the difference between what they are owed after all the fees and unpaid interest and taxes and insurance and everything like that. After that's been tacked on to the payoff, they got to make sure that they're asking their the mortgage insurance company to pay them the difference between that and whatever they sell it for. So again, they're going to have to take backups. They're going to have to be willing to take several months for everything to get approved and closed. And again, I said this before, I know, but it's one of those things that people are shocked by it, that there's a good chance the approved price is going to be higher than your initial offer price. And then again, obviously, I mentioned this before, they're sold as is. So financing could be an issue. You cannot get a regular VA purchase, a regular VA loan or an FHA loan to go through with most short sales, unless by some miracle they are actually maintaining the property in good order and there's not going to be any appraisal requirements, which that's almost never the case. And then finally, if you are brave and you are patient and you are kind of a glutton for punishment, you may want to consider listing a short sale, or maybe you have a family member or a friend that's gotten a tight spot and they're going to have to go short sell. So the general process for the listing side is, first and foremost, you have to do that third-party authorization form that I mentioned earlier, where you have to have permission to talk to the bank. And like I said, that could take a couple of days, that could take a couple of weeks. And then once you start that, then you're going to have to kind of figure out where they're at in the process. How long has it been since a mortgage payment has been paid? How close are we to actually foreclosing? Has it been sent to sheriff's sale? Is it on the sheriff's sale list? All kinds of things that you're going to have to find out before you can really move forward. You should expect to list the property at a fair and reasonable amount. My personal opinion, I've seen it done other ways, but my personal opinion on these is I'm listing these properties in what I think is a reasonable market price considering the condition. And I have comps. If I can find comps, I pull comps to back that up and to justify it. To me, you're wasting everyone's time if you're listing a house at $50,000, but you know dang good and well it's worth $100,000, even with the repairs that it needs, just to get offers, just to get multiple offers and get a contract sent over quickly. You're wasting everyone's time. It's just going to be really frustrating to a buyer that gets it under contract for $60,000 because they bid higher than the asking price. Then for 4 months later, 5 months later, the bank to say, nope, we won't take $60,000, but we will take $100,000. But again, I've seen some listing agents that do that, and then they have what's called a bank approved listing price, which means if if you see that in the MLS, it means that the bank has approved whatever price we've got it listed at to sell it, and they've approved that net. Again, as is, and not paying any closing costs for the buyers and stuff like that. So if you see that in the MLS, that's a good thing. It's gone through most of the process, and it should be a much more reasonable time frame to get it closed. But that's also why I try to set these at what I think is a reasonable and fair listing price to begin with, because I don't like wasting my time. These things take long enough. I don't want to add 3 months and going through 4 different buyers because I listed it at a lower price just to get offers in. Expect that you're going to have to educate everyone involved. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. I've had to, obviously most likely going to have to educate the buyer's realtor and the buyer. You're going to have to educate the seller. A lot of times you're going to have to educate the title company. Hey, this is as is. And this is what the bank is telling me is approved, because most of the time for the title companies, when they send the settlement statement over to the bank, they send it back and say, we're not paying half of these fees that you normally charge. And sometimes it's one of those that the title company just has to word it differently or put it in a different spot, put their fee in a different spot on the settlement statement in order for the bank to approve the settlement statement. So again, you're probably going to have to educate the title company. You are going to have to be willing as the listing agent to be that squeaky wheel. You're going to have to call or email or contact on Equator or whatever, however they have you working with them on. You have to be the squeaky wheel, and you're going to have to contact them at least weekly, if not a couple times a week. Because I promise you, if you just forget about it and you go about your other deals and you're working your other deals, next thing you know, it's been 3 months since you've talked to anyone, and you call up there just to check on them. They're like, oh, well, we've been waiting on this update from your seller. Do you have that for us yet? If you forget about it, they'll forget about it, because on the bank side, the negotiators that are dealing with these short sales probably have 20, 30, 40 files that they're dealing with. If you're not in front of them, they don't remember you. So you're going to have to be that squeaky wheel, and you're going to have to contact them. The biggest problem is you're going to have to keep the seller motivated and engaged in the process. Sellers they'll fill out the forms that the bank asks them to send over, and then they'll provide the pay stubs and the bank statements. You can get them to do that once, but 4 or 5 months later, the bank's going to ask for updates, and you're going to have to provide new bank statements and new pay stubs, and maybe fill out that form again that the bank sent over. And maybe, if a new tax year is happened, maybe even provide another tax return. And that's the hardest part about short sales, is keeping the sellers motivated and on track and actually doing this. Because if the sellers give up, you're just toast. Nothing's going to happen. I've had one here recently where the seller just gave up, stopped answering their phone, stopped returning phone calls, and I couldn't stop by where he lived and check on him because he was in Tulsa and I'm obviously down here in Norman. It's not worth it for me to drive to Tulsa to knock on this dude's door and ask him if he's done that paperwork that the bank's asking for, and he can get me pay stubs. So keeping the seller motivated is the key if you have the listing. Keeping the other realtor and their buyers motivated and engaged is also part of the challenge. You're gonna have to call that other realtor if another realtor is involved and they're dealing with the buyer, or if you're dealing with the buyer, you're gonna have to call your buyer every once in a while and just say, hey, I don't really have much of an update for you, but just checking in, making sure everything's going all right on your side. Because again, the other hardest part is keeping the buyers engaged and the buyers waiting patiently, because even though we've told them 6 times that this is going to take 4 or 5 months or longer, they are surprised when it actually does take 4 or 5 months to actually get everything through. And then the other key is, I've said it several times in several different ways, but it's the truth. You got to be prepared to be in this for the long haul. And like I said, if you're lucky, the long haul is 4 months or 5 months. If you're unlucky, you got an unmotivated seller and you got to hound them to get these, and it takes them a while to get pay stubs and bank statements and everything like that. It could be 6 months, 8 months. I had one that, like I said before, that took 14 months before we got everything finally done. And that was partially the seller's fault because I would send them text messages or call and leave a voicemail and, you know, asking for updated bank statements, and it would take them 3 weeks to get that to me. You know, so it's just, it's like I said, it's a long process. You gotta be in it for the long haul. That's basically it in a nutshell. I usually, like I said, this usually takes an hour or so, depending on how many questions we've got. So I've got time built into this presentation for questions. So feel free to unmute yourself and kind of shout it out, or just put it in the chat or whatever. Just let me know if you guys have questions. Not everyone at the same time.
I don't know if you addressed this or not because I had to step out for a minute, but Dustin did post in the chat asking if you'd share the slideshow after the training.
I absolutely can. I can send it to you.
Okay.
And then we can absolutely share it. There's no trade secrets in this. It's just, this is the basics of short sale. So yeah, I can absolutely send this over to you.
Awesome. And Dustin, did
Brian,
you have
as I understand it, most of these short sale listings come from people that call and say, "Hey, I'm in trouble. I'm behind. Can you help?" It's not the lender reaching out and saying, "Hey, can you try and sell this before we foreclose on it?"
You are correct. Most of the time, it is the sellers that reach out to you and they're saying, "Hey, I got laid off, this happened, that happened, whatever. I got behind and now I'm 4 or 5 months behind on my payment. What do I do?" Most of the time it is that. Sometimes the banks do, and I have been contacted by some banks, and it's usually a bank that I've worked with before, and they just know that I've done short sales and am educated in the process in general. But again, most of the time it is your past clients, or it is someone just Googling a realtor that's in their area and they're contacting you and they're saying, "Hey, I'm behind, I need help. How do I do this?" Anybody else have any questions in general or very specific scenarios, whatever?
in your opinion, Brian, what do you think is the best way for newer agents to connect with lenders to kind of become that point of contact on short sales?
What I do most of the time, I end up having to do the short sales through a website that's called, what is that website called? Give me just 1 second, I lost it. Equator. Equator.com. And you register on Equator, and that gets you registered with, I've done them for Bank of America, for SPS, specialty servicing. I've even done Fannie Mae's through those and everything like that. So that's the first step, is to get registered on that. And then the next step is really just calling. Unfortunately, there's no real shortcut. So you just have to call the loss mitigation department of whatever bank and say, "Hey, what do I need to do to get on your list of preferred realtors for short sales?" Because they absolutely do. The buyer, or the seller in this case, gets to pick their realtor. The banks cannot force them to use a specific realtor to list these properties, but they may have suggestions. And like I said, I've got contacted before from from buyers directly, and from banks, where they're like, "Hey, can you help out this client with this sale at this location?
Okay. Good. Anyone else have any questions?
Is this do you use the standard listing agreement?
Yes, you use the standard listing agreement with the short sale addendum. There is a short sale addendum that OREC has for listings, and there's a short sale addendum for the purchase contract as well. But basically that short sale addendum just notifies everyone that it is as is, everything is subject to lender approval, and that approval could be withdrawn and the property could be foreclosed at basically at any point. That's typically what the disclosure says.
So you could be in the middle of a sale and it could get foreclosed on.
Absolutely. I've had it happen. You know, it kind of sucks because we don't get paid at that point, but I've had that happen where, you know, we had it under contract, had a full price offer, but the sellers didn't get whatever form to them fast enough. And they just said, okay, we're done. And they foreclosed, sent it over to the sheriff's cell and foreclosed.
And is that when it goes to auction?
Yes, that's the auction. Sheriff's cell is the auction.
Okay. How do you buy an auction house?
To buy a house at auction at the sheriff's cell, basically you go to, they have sheriff's cell usually once a month. With COVID, it may be more like once a quarter. And they'll have it at a certain location. Most of the time it's at the county courthouse. You go and there's a list usually on the sheriff's website, or sometimes it's on the county's website, depending on what county you're in. And you know, they'll just go down the list. They'll say, okay, well, you know, item number 1 is this property, and it'll have an appraised amount on there. And most of the time the minimum acceptable bid is 75% of the appraised amount. So you know, if it appraised for $100,000 according to their appraisers, then the minimum bid is $75,000. And 9 times out of 10, the bank, quote unquote, buys it back from at the sheriff's cell. That gives them the right to foreclose, because that appraised amount may be inflated. It may not be a good dollar amount for, you know, good realistic market value. And, you know, somebody may look at it and say, there's no way in the world I'm paying $75,000 for this shack of a crack house that's over here. So, you know, sometimes that's the case, and then it just goes into foreclosure.
Lori, the minimum bid in Payne County is 2/3 of the appraised value. And I'm sure that it varies from county to county, like Brian said.
But people just go down there themselves, right? They don't use realtors for auctions, do they?
No, most of the time they do go down there themselves, because they have to provide, around here at least, they have to provide 10% of the purchase price right there in order to secure it. So if they bid $100,000, they have to provide cashier's checks for $10,000 on the spot. And then it goes through the process, which is usually 2 or 3 weeks long, for them to confirm the sale. And then they have to pay the balance once the sale is confirmed. And confirming the sale usually involves a judge looking at everything and basically approving the sale of the property for that price. And then, like I said, then the buyer has to bring the balance to the courthouse or to the asset treasurer's office or wherever they say, in order for the sale to be finalized at that point.
Okay.
Like I said before, most of the time with sheriff sales, the bank ends up with the property because if it doesn't meet whatever their minimum amount, because their minimum amount may not necessarily be the 2/3 of the appraised value. Sometimes the minimum amount is $50,000 over the appraised value because they're owed that much. And they're not going to, at the sheriff's sale at least, they're not going to accept, they're not going to take a loss because they can't get their mortgage insurance company to pay them the difference on the loss if they just sell it at the sheriff's sale.
So they'll buy it and then it'll wind up on like HUD Home Store or something.
Yeah, they will buy it, quote unquote, buy it back at the sheriff's sale. And then, you know, they'll finalize the foreclosure at that point, and then it will end up wherever it's going to end up as a foreclosure. In our market, every foreclosure ends up listed with a realtor, some realtor, and it ends up listed in the MLS. Now, it could be, if it's a HUD home, it will end up on HUD Home Store's website as well. If it's a Fannie Mae, it'll end up on, you know, homepath.com as well. If it's Bank of America's, they may have it listed on their site or whatever. But, you know, good thing for you to tell your potential buyers if they're looking at these is it is going to end up in the MLS with a realtor once they are through with the foreclosure process and it's actually able to be purchased. In Oklahoma, there's not a way to buy it directly from Wells Fargo or Bank of America before it hits the market. Okay, anybody else have questions about short sales or this process in general? All right. Misty, I'm going to go ahead and send this this PowerPoint over to you, and feel free to share it with whoever. But yeah, other than that, if nobody has any other questions, we're good to go. We're done.
Okay, sounds good. I will get it out to everyone who's posted in the chat requesting it.
All right.
Thanks, Brian. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Brian.
No problem.
Thank you, Brian. Bye, guys.